Baylor starting quarterback Blake Shapen has entered the transfer portal. And could this just be the first shoe to drop? Let's talk about it with yet another emergency Locked On Baylor.
You are Locked On Baylor, your daily podcast on the Baylor Bears, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thank you for joining me with another episode of Locked On Baylor, another emergency episode of Locked On Baylor. As we had yesterday, of course, Dave Aranda sticking around. He's looking for a new OC, and there are some negative repercussions to that, one of which being you're going to have guys that enter the transfer portal. And that's the first thing that we have seen, the first shoe to drop, so to speak, is Blake Shapen, your starting quarterback of the last two seasons, someone this coaching staff put a lot into in terms of responsibility and belief. He is entering the transfer portal, and it's tough to blame him. He is a guy, first and foremost, who laid it all out there for the team, even when a lot of people wanted him gone at the end of last year. It is kind of crazy the difference a year makes. I think a lot of you listening would have wanted him gone last year, but instead, I don't think you're thinking about that this year. And it's too bad. He gave two pretty good seasons to Baylor and, of course, stepped up big in that Big 12 championship. His second career start, balled out, won the conference championship for Baylor, and now he is headed somewhere else. And I think part of that is looking for a new OC, right? He is a guy who would fit into a Jeff Grimes offense pretty well. A dual threat guy who thrives on kind of quick passing, get the ball out quickly, loves going to a good tight end. And I think that's probably something that he will be looking for in wherever he goes. And I think this actually probably helps out the Baylor coaching staff a little bit. Like you don't ever want this to happen, but you saw what you have from Sawyer Robertson on Saturday night against West Virginia. He had a great game. A far cry from what he was the first couple of chances he got during the season when it was thrown on his plate. He got injured, and he looked pretty good on Saturday night, and he's a much different style of quarterback than Blake is, so maybe that will also help out Baylor's coaching staff in terms of looking for that next OC. But this one stinks. He's a guy who, in a season where there just wasn't enough effort all the way around, he always gave that to you. And it's just too bad to see him go. I was someone who was really defending him last year. I thought he was, a good guy to have as your quarterback. I mean, you could do a lot worse than Blake Shapen. I thought he was actually a really good option to have. So looking at his career numbers in parts of 3 seasons, he goes for 36 touchdowns and 13 interceptions in that time, throws for over 5,000 yards in that time, and never has a completion percentage worse than 61%, which was this year's percentage, just a hair under 62%. Obviously banged up, didn't play in all the games this year, but 13-3 in the touchdown to interception ratio. He's a kid who's not chucking it down the field. Those are averages of about 7.5 yards. But I thought he worked really well with this offense, and by no means was the offense the problem this year, and neither was he. I mean, this is a kid who gutted it out, left it all out there for you, and had pretty decent numbers for someone who didn't have a running game, didn't have an offensive line, and didn't have any kind of consistency at outside receiver. In fact, Ketron Jackson caught a touchdown pass from Sawyer Robertson this weekend, and he was just the second Baylor receiver with a receiving touchdown this year. Monterey Baldwin had a couple in there as well. Let's go down to the comments, see what you guys think, because honestly, it took me by surprise. The more I think about it, the less surprised I am, but I didn't see that coming. I didn't, especially, as soon as possible, really, the day after they announced they're retaining Dave Aranda. He says, I'm out of here. He wants to get a good jump on this thing. So we'll see where that goes. Scotty B says, well, wish him good luck. He was just injury prone. A little bit. Yeah. I mean, he's not the biggest guy out there, but yes, he did have some injuries. Nothing too debilitating, which was good, but I don't think he quite recovered from the concussion that he had last year in terms of last season. I don't think he really recovered that. I really liked the way he played this year. So definitely, I hope he is someone who will have success and get a real shot to start at the next place he goes. I think he can be a Power 5 quarterback. Do I think he's going to be, a college football playoff guy? I don't think so, but I definitely think he is someone who could start at the Power 5 level. He's done nothing to disprove that. Colin says Sawyer showed some promise, which is good. That's right. I mean, this is more the guy we thought we were going to see early on in the season when Blake got hurt, what Sawyer gave you on Saturday night. But of course, there were a lot of factors going into that, mainly being he was a kind of a spread offense, run and shoot kind of guy. He comes into a wide zone, which is about as different as you can get without running the triple option. And he's kind of thrown into the fire in week 2 against Utah. And the numbers weren't great in the couple of games that he started, but you thought, well, he was a 4-star guy in college or in high school, excuse me. Mike Leach wanted him, so he must have some promise. And we definitely saw a lot of that promise on Saturday night against West Virginia. So definitely, I think right now that's the guy you're looking at for next year. And that's the most promising thing that you've had recently is that you got a good performance from him on Saturday night, and that you can roll with that and roll that momentum into next year. I don't know how much you can roll the momentum into any other position, but definitely at quarterback. Scotty also says, I expect Baylor to get a transfer QB now. There are some good options. Yeah, I would expect that too, Scotty. If nothing else other than depth at the quarterback position, I think that's something that you'll start to see basically every year with almost every program, a quarterback going in, a quarterback going out. We know how different that position is from anything else on the field. So yeah, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if it's someone like RJ Martinez, who you had come in this year. Remember, you got Nate Bennett, who is a friend of the program, coming in next year from Thousand Oaks, California. 3-star guy, but someone who really loves Baylor and has shown some promise in high school as well. Zach says, Shapen is a dog, huge loss. He'll do well somewhere like Nebraska. That's a good point, Zach. I think overall what you're saying is he's going to be a Power 5 guy. I wouldn't rule out Nebraska in that exact example, actually, because I've been talking about basically his whole career, just how similar he is to Charlie Brewer. And that's not a bad thing at all. But his kind of mobility, the style of offense that is good for him, his accuracy numbers, his size. I mean, he looks like him too. He's very similar to Charlie Brewer, very similar. And so I think if Matt Rule and the Cornhuskers are in the market for a quarterback or someone who can compete for that starting quarterback job, I think Blake Shapen could absolutely get a look there. He's someone who was recruited by Rule, I believe, at the very end. Maybe was one of the first Aranda guys, but not exactly a huge relationship between those two. But the style of quarterback that has succeeded with Matt Rule is absolutely someone like Blake Shapen. So that will be interesting to see if he heads out to Lincoln. Mick says, if Richard Reese leaves next, I'm going to cry. Mick, I might need to send you some Kleenexes. Might need to send you some of those. I don't know if he'll be next, but I think he will probably enter the transfer portal with the flashes he showed not only Saturday night, mainly in the return game, but obviously a really productive freshman year back in 2022 when he was a freshman All-American. I'm going to talk about that on tomorrow's episode, but I wouldn't be surprised at all if he also hits the portal. I think you're going to see a lot of guys hit the portal. It's not uncommon at this point to see 8 or 10 guys hit the portal every year for even good programs. But when you have one with the uncertainty that Baylor has in terms of who is going to be the alpha, who is going to be the offensive coordinator, but also with the certainty that Baylor has, you certainly know what Dave Aranda gives you. And I think a lot of guys will probably be looking elsewhere for that. Avery says, figure he couldn't win another quarterback battle versus Sawyer and another transfer quarterback who might come along with the new OC. I mean, I don't know about that. I don't know who the new OC is. I don't know. It could be someone, if it is an old Baylor name like a Dino Babers, yeah, that would fit Sawyer Robertson a little bit more than it would Blake Shapen. But he has won a quarterback battle in the past, a couple of times actually, beat out Sawyer Robertson to start this season and beat out a Sugar Bowl champion and Gary Bohannon just 2 seasons ago or before the 2022 season. So I don't know if he's shying away from the competition, but definitely it's a point of we just don't know what that fit is going to be like and what this new offense is going to look like. So Joseph says, my worst nightmare brought to life. What is the bright side? The bright side, Joseph, is you had a good performance from Sawyer Robertson the other night. And in theory, the transfer portal should work for you the way it works against you. Blake Shapen's a heck of a quarterback that's going into the portal. He's going to make some other program really happy this holiday season. But by that same token, there are going to be other kinds of Blake Shapens out there in the transfer portal. So that's the bright side of it. You bring in someone who can fit for Sawyer Robertson, who has probably some more arm talent at the end of the day. And you'll see what else is out there in the transfer portal. Chris says, sad to see him go, but I have faith in Sawyer once he has some time to run the new offense. That's, again, I think that was really the detriment to him in the beginning of the season. I know he had an ankle injury at one point in there too, and he just kind of had to gut it out and keep playing. But this allows a coach to come in and really mold an offense around him. I'm not going to lie, seeing the kind of quarterback he was, we've had Seth Parr on ESPN 1660. I covered him last year at Anna, where he's still the head coach, the Anna Coyotes, who might well win the state championship in 4A Division I. He was Sawyer's high school coach, and the offense that he ran there at Lubbock Coronado, I was just like, what? He wants to come here and do the wide zone. So hopefully, yeah, that just ends up being a better fit for him there. Scotty also says, Baylor needs to get transfers at offensive line. Ton of good guys out there. Yes, please. Give me a list. I would love that because I think that's first and foremost. No matter who you have at quarterback, they are going to get brutalized, terrorized if it's the same quality of offensive line that the Bears had this year. That is where it really starts. I mean, quarterback is, you are going to have some quality either way, whether it was Blake Shapen or Sawyer Robertson, but you've got to start in the trenches. You really do. So that's a very good point, Scotty. I mean, that's where it starts. And Zach on that same point says offensive line is probably the hardest position to fill needs in the transfer portal. But Elliott from 24/7 Sports has a segment on this. We can't hang a hat on that. That's also true. That's also true. It's kind of a dime a dozen when it comes to offensive linemen in the transfer portal. The ones that really succeed are the freaks at low-level schools. There's a lineman from, it's either Yale or Columbia, who's like 6'8", 350 at tackle. It's those kind of guys who really hit their stride once they're in college, but they're usually at a lower level. Whereas you see it now, especially at quarterback, a guy like Jaden Daniels is at Arizona State and transfers and makes an immediate impact at another Power 5 school in LSU. Whereas with offensive linemen, you don't usually see someone go from like a Washington to a Georgia. You see them go from Yale or Minnesota, or UTEP had one of the best on the market last year, and then start to hit their stride in another big school. So yeah, it's you got to be careful with it. We saw that last year with the Barrington brothers coming in and certainly had some hype around them. The coaching staff were saying it's going to be a new look, and what we thought was implied, a new look, good offensive line because of those two guys you landed in the transfer portal, and it didn't turn out like that. Didn't turn out like that. Mick Muffin says, Blake is, quote, looking for a starting job at a winning program, end quote. How far will you fall in 2 years? I'm not surprised if that's the case. I don't know where that quote is from. I would have to see it before really commenting on it. But yeah, that's not what Baylor is right now. And that's not what Baylor's going to be next year. He goes out with immediate eligibility and will probably have 2 years to play at a program that is more stable and more ready to win and show some NFL draft prospect like Blake Shapen. So yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. It sucks. It sucks for Baylor, but that's about what Baylor's at right now. That's about what Baylor's at right now. Howard says the dam is about to break. The transfer portal will be filled. It's going to be filled no matter what. But yeah, I do think it's going to be a lot of Bears in there. And that's why it's so important to at least target a style of offensive coordinator you're looking at as soon as possible here. I mean, within the next few weeks, you have to make that hire. The transfer portal goes really into effect December 4th, which is next week. And so you are going to need a philosophy at least on hand to be able to target the guys to come in and fill these holes. And hopefully these guys, these coaches that come in will get some more weight in decision-making on player personnel than it sounds like the coaches like Jeff Grimes had at Baylor, where it sounds like they were bringing names to Aranda and they were being shot down. So I really hope that there is some better opportunities for those new coaches to bring in the personnel they want. Chris says, thoughts on Will Howard to Baylor? Just entered the transfer portal from Kansas State. I don't know about that one. I don't think so. I don't think so. I guess it does, again, all depend on who the OC is. I think Will Howard right now is a little too good for Baylor. And I think he'll get a starting spot at a Big Ten school. That wouldn't surprise me at all. Will Howard's got some damn good numbers, man. And he can run an offense. And this is not a case of Kansas State wasn't utilizing him. He's got a chance, like a Graham Mertz at Wisconsin last year, got the chance at Florida. Now that one didn't really work out. But sometimes it does. Sam Hartman has had a pretty good statistical year at Notre Dame. They haven't been as good as they wanted to be. So I expect Will Howard to get a starting job at a program right now that is better than Baylor. So it would be great. It would be great. Okay, the quote, Mick, is from the Pete Thamel report. Thank you on that. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense that he's looking for somewhere to win. Sam says, not to be a pessimist, but is NIL going to be fixed enough to get anyone in the portal? That's a great question. That is a great question. I don't know. And that's something we kind of talked about yesterday with retaining Dave Aranda on yesterday's live show. Was I just don't know how quickly you can fix NIL at Baylor. You can fix transfer portal in terms of what you're targeting and what you're looking for and the on the field offer you can give to guys. But these things just don't happen overnight. And you're going to have to lure a lot of guys in the transfer portal. And NIL, excuse me, is going to be a big part of that. I'm going to need to get a drink here. I'm going to choke. NIL is going to be a big part of that. And honestly, hearing over the last few days from some good reputable sources within the program, NIL is not as bad as we think it is, which is more damning to Dave Aranda than anything else. But from the numbers that I've heard and the guys getting those numbers, we're actually in a pretty decent spot. So I don't know that you're going to be able to attract some of the biggest names in the portal, Will Howard being one of them. But you should be able to get some quality in here. But NIL does not get fixed overnight, to your point. Okay, sorry about that. What else we got here? And Scotty says, some of the guys who will enter the transfer portal are probably guys who aren't getting playing time anyway. Yeah, no, that's why it's going to be such high numbers, Scotty, this year for Baylor, because I think you're going to see a good bit of guys who are getting playing time, plus those guys that we've never heard of. And this has been a theme, especially on offense, the last couple of years of the last two seasons, really, of not necessarily the best players, but impact offensive players hitting the portal and looking for another opportunity. Of course, Kyron Drones was a big one last year, the backup quarterback, but also Josh Fleeks and Seth Jones, who were bright spots, not huge producers. And now I think, obviously, Blake Shapen. I think you'll probably see Richard Reese. I still wonder about Drake Dabney, if he just wants a shot somewhere better. So I don't know about that. We'll see. But definitely a lot, big numbers will hit for Baylor. Will hit the portal this offseason. Colin says, any OC candidates you've been hearing about or think will be good? Good question, Colin. I'm going to refrain right now because that is going to be part of the next two shows on Locked On Baylor. So keep an eye out for that on Tuesday and Wednesday. So especially tomorrow will be a Blake Shapen heavy episode. So be sure to tune into that, like and subscribe, and get in the comments on that. And so with that being said, I'm going to probably keep it at that for the show today for this live emergency episode. But let me know what you think down in the comments. Did you see this coming? Because again, hindsight, looking at it now, it makes a lot of sense. It just wasn't a name I had pegged for hitting the transfer portal, and definitely hope the best for him. And maybe he was just a Jeff Grimes guy all along. I said Jeff Grimes got a raw deal. Now you could be seeing the price paid for it. I know a lot of players were big on the Jeff Grimes train. They didn't want to see him go. So interesting. But yeah, be sure to like and subscribe. Leave a comment. Let me know what you think. Tune in tomorrow. We will have a full breakdown of Blake's career, some of his greatest moments, and where he might end up and who might be coaching up the next quarterbacks at Baylor. Thank you guys once again Really appreciate my old English teachers who didn't teach me, I guess. Appreciate you guys. This is Locked On Baylor.